Hello everybody, this is Danny from Deep South Homestead. Yes, it's that time of the year again. We are back out here in the sugarcane patch. We're having to get it ready. Last year we busted our tail for 8 days in a row. This year we are not going to do it that way. This year we're going to do it in stages because we have so much cane. Now let me tell you, there will be some sugarcane for sale on Deep South Homestead. Go to our Etsy store, deepsouthhomestead.etsy.com. There will be some sugarcane going up there for sale. Just keep an eye on the store if you're interested, and it should be there. There'll be a link in the description down below about that. And I'm also up in the cards up above. I'm going to be putting some videos from the past that has to do with the sugarcane. In case you have any questions that maybe I don't answer today, you can go back and watch those videos specifically about planting and different things like that. I'm going to try to cover a little bit of that today, but it may not all get in there like I want. But anyway, we're going to move ahead. Now there's a few tools that's used when it comes to sugarcane. One is called a cane knife. And this cane knife is used for several different purposes. It has a hook on the end of it here. Plus it's sharp on both sides. It can be used for, if you don't have a stripper, you can hook it in there and you can pull it down and you can strip the fodder from the cane with the hook that's on the end of it, and then turn around and take the back side of it and actually chop the cane down with it. And secondly, we have here, this is called a stripper. Now the stripper, we have a set of patterns on our Etsy store that's up for sale for the end of it right here, the metal part of it that shows you it's the template to make it out of. And I actually have a video about making this and installing it on a stick. That'll be in the cards up here too. You'll be able to find that video. But this is called a cane stripper. It works in much the same as this, except this one, you just reach up, you hook it on the cane, and as you come down, it strips the cane off. And then you can take it, once you've stripped some of it, and you can grab it, and you can pull a lot of the fodder away from the cane. It makes it a little bit easier when it comes time to chop it down if some of that stuff is out of the way. It's just faster than using the knife. And plus, if you use the stripper now, it destroys the eyes that it's on the sugarcane, which means that you cannot use it for planting after that. The only time you use the stripper is when you're going to be squeezing it for syrup and you know that's all you're going to be using it for. Otherwise, if you want to save any of it for planting, do not use the stripper now. Let me put that in there. Now, if you don't possess either one of these, one thing you want to watch out for is sugarcane has fibers in it that's a lot like, the sugarcane fodder, should I say, has fibers in it that's a lot like insulation. Now, different varieties are worse than other varieties. But what will happen is, if you're not careful, if you do it barehanded, it will get in your hands and it will just, it's like fiberglass. It just itches the fool out of you. And if you are sensitive to stuff like that, you might want to wear gloves. I've done it for years and it doesn't really bother me that bad. But you can just reach up and you can pull the fodder off. It's not hard. And if you live in the deep south like us, different varieties of sugarcane, when you pull the fodder off, if you're not careful, we have the chewing cane that's in the other patch. It's so sweet that the stalk will be covered up with fire ants. And you will get fire ants all over your hands and they'll bite you. And it's really not a good, pleasant thing to have happen. But it's one of the plagues of the deep south, let me say that. I'm not sure if that happens with sorghum or anything like that, but I know it happens with different varieties of sugarcane. And each time you pull one of these leaves off of the fodder here, it's full of water. You can watch water just goes to pouring out the end of it. So that's how the sugarcane remains sustainable during the heat of the summer in tropical regions and places like ours. Even though it's a drought, the dew at night hits these leaves and it runs down in there and it holds it, and the cane actually feeds off of that water. Now, I'm going to chop one of these canes down, and I'm going to bring it up closer to the camera, and we're going to look at it, and we're going to talk about some of the different aspects of sugar cane here. Now, we're going to use our cane knife to do this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here about 1 inch above the ground is what I usually do, and you can just take it and the cane just chops right off. It's a lot taller than the camera makes it look like. You'll notice the cane is a dark color and it becomes lighter the further up you go. That means there's more water, less sugar in it. So what I'll usually do is take right here where the real light joints is and it starts to grow more, or the fodder begins to grow, and I just whack it off. And that leaves us, this piece of cane is I mean, I know y'all are having trouble seeing this, but let me back out and show you. This is like a 6 foot tall stick of cane. Now I'm going to come back in and show you a little bit about the sugar cane. One thing about sugar cane is these are called nodes. Now this is where your cane, when you plant this, will grow from. There's nodes. Each one of these will form roots right here. And then nodes are on alternate sides. There's one on this side. 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 They alternate back and forth. Now, when you go to cut cane for planting, we cut ours in anywhere between, say 10 to 13 inch pieces. And I'll show you, let me get my knife back here. Like from here, I like to have 2 or 3 good joints. Now this one I can probably end up with 3. And I usually cut it in between it here so that as it dries out, now we wax ours before we ship it, but I like to cut back here. Now sometimes it's not always possible, sometimes you're closer to it, but if you wax them, that's fine because they don't, you know, you don't lose them. And when we cut it, what we end up with is a piece like this. Now we have a node, and another node. And actually there's a little piece of a root left right here. But we'll wax this end and we'll wax this end up here when it comes time to ship it. Or a lot of times we do it before we even plant it in the garden, just simply because we don't want it drying out. Plus it prevents, in our district of the world, down here in the deep south, the fire ants, because this has sugar in it. Fire ants will come to the sugar, and I mean they'll just ramsack it and they'll eat it and just destroy it. So that is what we'll be selling on our Etsy store. It'll be pieces of cane like this from this variety. Now this is syrup making variety. I got this cane many years ago. Do not know what variety it is. The man had no clue. It had been on his farm for years and years. So it's a very old variety of cane. Makes fantastic sugar cane syrup. Now there is a difference between sugar cane and sorghum. Sugar cane plants by these individual pieces like this. Now what we do is we lay them end to end. And the reason we don't use a whole big stalk like this is if the big stalk, if you plant it and it happens to root right here in the middle first and starts growing here, what happens is it sucks all the nutrients out of this cane and only this part gets it, and you lose all this out here. So what we do is we put it in short pieces so that we get more sugar cane and a better stand of it from putting in the short pieces versus putting in the long pieces. Now that's a little bit about the sugar cane part, and I'm going to lay this on the ground here and hope that fire ants don't get all over it. Now this is the top that I cut out of it. Now the top, what we're going to do with it is we're going to take this and we'll feed this to the pigs, because the pigs will take this end right here that's still got a little bit of sugar and water in it, and they'll chew on it and chew on it until they chew it up completely, and then there'll be all this fodder will be left laying in there. And actually during the wintertime, the pigs will actually gather this fodder up and they'll take it and make beds out of it so that they can stay warm in the wintertime. Now sorghum on the top of it won't look like this. Sorghum will have a giant seed head up here to look a lot like what they call broom corn. It'll have a beautiful seed head, and those seeds is what you'll be using to plant sorghum. Now sorghum won't get near as big in diameter as sugarcane does, It takes a lot more sorghum to press out to make juice than it does actual sugar cane. Now sugar cane, it takes about 100 stalks on average to make 10 gallons of juice. And it takes about 10 gallons of juice to boil down and make 1 gallon of syrup. Now a lot of people are going to ask, I already know the question that's going to be coming. One is sugarcane molasses the same as sorghum molasses? Well, technically, if you want to get technical about it, you can't, they say you can't make molasses out of sorghum. I don't understand why they say that. Molasses is actually a process of 2 or 3 stages of cooking. Molasses is a lot thicker, a lot more of the nutrients, the density of it's been changed. It has a total different texture about it. It has a different look about it. It has a different smell about it. Has a different group of minerals in it than just plain syrup does. But in the world we live in, sugarcane molasses and sorghum molasses has ended up being a lot like sweet potato yams. There's actually no such thing as a sweet potato yam, because a yam is a root crop all of its own that comes from over in Africa somewhere, and some of your Asian countries and down in South America. And the sugar cane is a lot like that. It's just that people have gotten used to hearing sweet potato yams, that people say sorghum molasses or sugarcane molasses. It's either sugarcane syrup or either it's molasses. It's those are just technical forms if you want to get technical about it. And when it comes to making the molasses, the first cooking process is what's actually called the syrup, which would be sugarcane syrup, sorghum syrup. Molasses is actually a 4 or 5 stage cooking process to bring it down to a deeper, richer. You're actually cooking out some of the other things and leaving in some things, and the mineral content completely changes in it. The fodder that we actually are going to be scraping off of this, well, we use it for 2 or 3 different purposes. One, if it looks like it's going to be a real bad winter, we'll cover the stubbles up that we just chopped off with the fodder, and put some dirt over it. It's kind of like a blanket. And then in the spring, we either burn it off or we come through here and we just rake it off. And then we take it from that point. If we have a compost pile, we put it in the compost. Or if we have some gullies washing on our property, we'll put it in those gullies, because it makes an excellent binder of soil to keep erosion from taking place. Those are some of the things that we use it for. But now planting, you want your rows to be, depending on you as an individual, if you like to mow between your rows and keep your sugar cane looking really, really nice like we do up at our other patch, we like to put it about 6-foot rows. This cane here is in 4-foot rows. That's why it has so many weeds in it. We were trying to conserve space over here, so we put it closer together. And as a result, we cannot get the lawnmower down through it to mow it. So we have more weeds over here than we do in our other patch. But planting, you want to be able to bust a furrow open, and you'll see that in one of our videos, which we can link up here. You'll actually see the busted open furrow opened up. I like to break mine down about 8 inches deep and lay the cane on it end on end. You'll see that in the video clips. And then we'll come back and we'll bed it up in the fall, and it'll stay there all winter, forming roots underground, so that when next spring comes and the soil warms up, then what happens then is you'll see the little shoots start popping up out of the ground. And you have to be careful, because when you plant it in the fall, if you happen to have a little bit of an Indian summer during the winter months, the cane will actually start popping up, and what you'll have to do is go through there and take you a pair of loppers or something and cut that stuff off just under the soil surface a little bit and put some dirt back over it to keep it from freezing. Because freezing is one of your worst enemies with sugar cane. Now, sugar cane can stand a frost, but it cannot stand a freeze. If freeze hits your sugar cane, it will sour it all the way into the root, and you will lose it all. So for those of you who want to know whether or not sugar cane is a perennial plant, yes it is. But if you let it freeze, it will die all the way into the root and kill it completely. And another thing we want to mention here is the time of the year to process your sugar cane. It's best to do it when it's very, very cold. We like to do ours when it's around 30 to 35, 40 degrees, somewhere in that area. Now there's a lot of reasons for that. One is it's just a lot more comfortable to work around the heat that's transferred from the furnace. Secondly, because of the sugar content in it when you're cooking it and the evaporation going up, yellow jackets, honeybees, and all that kind of stuff really come in hard and heavy. If it's the least bit warm where they can fly and they're just annoying, people get bit. It's really an aggravating process if you try to do it when it's too warm. But then again, some people like to do it just as traditions, and they do it all when the family's together. And no matter whether it's October, November, or December, they try to do it anytime in there when the family's together so they can have a family time out of it. And it is a great time for family time to do that. 2 years ago, it got really cold, and we did it early in October. Last year, it didn't get cold at all until way up into November, so we waited till Thanksgiving to do it. This year, we're going to be doing it probably some in the first part of October, if the mornings are cool enough where we can actually get out and do it, and then the bees aren't too bad, because we have some YouTube friends coming who need to know a little bit about this process. And plus, we don't want this whole burden on us like it was last year. Last year, 8 days, guys, anywhere between 10 and 16 hours a day, we were doing sugar cane. And that really, the only day that Wanda and I took off last year was Thanksgiving Day. And then the next day, we were right back at it again. So it's really up to you about time frame, but just know that it needs to happen anywhere between October and the end of November. Now, you can cut your cane and you can store it for a couple of weeks, but you run the risk of it souring. So keep in mind, now there's a little bit of a process I'm going to explain here. Once we strip this cane, we'll strip it probably a week before we make syrup, because we're trying to get all the water out of it that we can, because that's the whole process, is cooking the water out of the sugar cane and leaving nothing but the syrup in it. So we will strip it, let it set for a week. We will top it the day before we cut it down, and then the next day we will come in and cut it down, and we'll take it to the mill and we process it that day. And what that does is that prevents any type of souring or anything like that that may take place. But now, if the weather is cold enough, let me say this. You can take and cut it one day, squeeze it that afternoon, and you can let it set overnight in a giant barrel and actually begin the cooking process the next day, because I have done that in the past when it's going to be like in the 20s and low 30s. I'll actually process 200 or 300 gallons of it one day, just squeezing it. And the next day we'll just cook that whole batch off, because it's that cold. It's like being in a giant refrigerator. It won't go bad. So guys, this has been Sugarcane Gardening 101. I hope that it's been a little bit educational. We're going to put in the links up above, some more of our Gardening 101 videos. But this is going to be a Gardening 101. I hadn't really planned it to be that, but I think that it's pretty educational for those who want to do a little bit of sugarcane gardening. It makes a fantastic border between you and a neighbor. It's really good, but the only problem is in the wintertime, you got to cut it down. And understand, there's some differences in sugarcane. There's chewing cane and there's syrup making cane. Now we have both. You can make syrup out of the chewing cane. You just have to be very careful, because it's so sweet that you don't scorch it during the cooking process. The syrup making type like this is not so apt to scorch. The syrup making kind, the cane's a lot harder. It's a lot smaller in diameter. The chewing cane is a lot larger in diameter, and it's a lot softer. Makes it easier for chewing. You can actually take the chewing cane and you can cut it up and you can make what's called candy sticks. You can freeze them in the freezer. We'll put a link up there where you can see that. You can put them in the freezer and you can keep them all winter and take a few out, let them thaw, and just sit there and chew on them. Makes a great snack for kids and for you as an adult. around party times or something like that. It's really good for that. So, all right guys, this is our second sugarcane patch. The sugarcane on the right of me here is the syrup making cane. It's probably 12 feet tall, I reckon. This is the chewing cane that's on this side. This is the purple cane. We got basically a short row and another row here of a chewing cane. We got one big long row of the syrup making cane, and actually this is our best year for sugar cane at Deep South Homestead we have ever had as far as the way the cane looks. So we're really pleased with it this year. We're looking forward to getting a lot of syrup out of it and being able to maybe possibly sell y'all some of the stalks if you're interested in it. So guys, I got a lot to do today. I got to strip some cane, getting ready. A lot more stuff's got to be done on Deep South Homestead. So I hope this has been educational. I hope y'all have enjoyed it. And thank y'all for joining me on this Gardening 101 sugarcane.